Hello, so today we're going to talk about what is tarot and how does it work. So tarot is a hieroglyphic divination game that is a symbolic representation of archetypal patterns of the collective unconscious, and when read properly can assist in our spiritual growth. Tarot can also be read as a divination tool which can affect the cognitions and habitual behaviors. So each card offers countless permutations on thoughts, emotions, and memories. So tarot means the royal road of life according to Egyptian hieroglyphics, and in Sanskrit language, which is primarily used in India, it means fixed star. Tarot embodies various esoteric and spiritual practices, which consist of numerology, alchemy, astrology, and Kabbalah. So to be a good tarot reader, it can be necessary to have a background in these systems, but there are cases where people have been able to read the meaning of the cards without any background in these spiritual practices. But I personally think I would feel more comfortable knowing that the tarot reader has a background in at least, I would say, 2 to 3 of these practices to know how to interpret the cards properly. As far as traditional tarot cards, not other tarot cards that are created as oracle cards. There are different types, but I'm talking about their traditional tarot cards. They're traditional tarot cards that has come into existence within the 14th century. The first research on tarot cards was done by archaeologist and pastor Court de Gebelin. He discovered it in Paris in 1470 and assumed it was a part of an Egyptian book called the Book of Thoth. Court de Gebelin speculated that the cards originated in Egypt, and then he stated that they may have been created in China in AD 1120. But there has been no concrete evidence to suggest that that is actually true as far as the links to Egypt and China, though many of the cards clearly have some symbolic images that were known in Egypt. Another scholar who has done research on tarot extensively is author Edward Waite. He was the first man to attempt a systematic study of the history of Western occultism. He is also known for creating the most popular tarot deck in the Western Hemisphere, which is known as the Rider-Waite deck. And he has an extensive body of work on mysticism, esoteric arts, and the tarot. His research is very impressive, but some of it is actually pretty hard to get your hands on. Some of his books now range from $3,000. But luckily, his books on tarot are pretty available to the public. Edward Waite suspected that tarot came into Britain and France by Indo-Tatari gypsies who could have been from Asia, or Indo-Tatari gypsies could have been considered Hebrews back then, who came into France in the 13th century. Edward Waite suspects that it was actually ancient Hebrews who may have taught the Egyptians about tarot, and that tarot was able to implement its way into the dominant society, which was Egypt at that time. And that is why many speculate that it was Egypt who invented tarot. The system of tarot contains 78 cards that, again, they represent a archetype pattern of the collective unconscious. So what is the collective unconscious? The term collective unconscious was introduced by Carl Jung, and basically it is a collection of all of the inherited thoughts, patterns, emotions, and symbols of mankind. It's like a repository that all humans can access. This has been traditionally known as the Akashic Records, and Carl Jung did have a background in Eastern mysticism, occult mysticism. He did have knowledge of what these Akashic Records were, but as far as bringing the concept to academia, he called it collective unconscious, which was also a part of the psychoanalytical theory that Sigmund Freud had created. particularly when he talked about the personal conscious, the ego, the super ego. I can't remember all of them, but Carl Jung did agree with Freud on that, but he added the collective unconscious to that idea. Images and memories of the human experience are passed down from generation to generation, and it can be accessed at any time. And that is why we see common ideas that can exist on different, and I'm talking about before the invention of technology, but we see ideas and patterns that exist on different continents by people who had no contact with each other. For example, in tarot, there is a card that represents the father archetype. This card is called the Emperor. In various continents, we have these ideas of what a father archetype should be like, that they should protect, that they should have this reign, this authority, this domain. So the archetype that represents the father in tarot is an actual concept. The collective unconscious also consists of impulses of which the individual is not aware of, but they originate in the inherited structure of the brain. For example, the archetype of someone being a scholar, the archetype of someone being a vixen, or even a shaman. Those are patterns that exist before we interact with the world, before we even come here. Carl Jung got a lot of flack for trying to even bring the idea to academia. But I suggest that it's pretty credible, especially as a tarot reader. When you read the tarot cards, it offers a full process of how this works out. You get to see how these ideas and patterns are actually playing out in your life. And you can read it in a way that can actually help people, that can actually guide people. And it most of the times will be relevant to their actual situation or their inquiry when they go and get a tarot reading. So tarot first practices was actually not for divination. Divination was secondary, but tarot was studied by certain groups of people who wanted spiritual growth or enlightenment, or to integrate certain aspects of their personality so that they can become whole and content with life. Now, seeking tarot for divination is not a bad thing. According to scholars and actual esoterists who did research on tarot and were heavily involved into mystic orders, wrote about how tarot as a divination game was secondary. When tarot made it into the scene in the 14th century in France, people were using it as a card game. They didn't quite understand what the images and patterns on the cards were. They had no clue what it was, so they were using it as a card game. That is why the current deck of cards that we see are pretty similar to an actual tarot deck. And the composition of all 78 cards came over many years and after much research. So again, when one receives a tarot reading, the reader can have access to the collective unconscious or the Akashic records. And again, this can be used to assist an individual on their journey to personal growth. And this can be done by a term called the individuation process, which is also coined by Carl Jung. Another term that may be more suitable for those into spiritual practices could be integration of the personality or understanding the shadow side of ourselves. Now, the individuation process is basically integrating the unconscious with the conscious mind so that one can receive alignment with the higher self, which is also known as enlightenment, Christ consciousness, or awareness. And the individuation process is a self-analysis process. It is also an alchemical process. So many elements that you would see in alchemy can be used in the individuation process. Now, I understand that divination is what is the prominent framework that tarot is known for. Like, when you think of tarot, you're thinking, oh, you want to see in the future, there's fortune telling. But as far as its ancient uses and its uses among those in, I would say, a mystic society, they would use it as a representation of the spiritual practices that I told you about earlier, the Kabbalah, alchemy, numerology, astrology. The cards for the tarot reader are just like, I would say, an easy way to implement those thought systems to people, to help them. And divination is just one way in which to see what's actually going on with the individual so that you can help them. Now, in the event that someone wants to know, how is my ex-husband's wife, what does she think about me, that kind of stuff, um people use it for that. I have been asked questions like that. So what does my son's girlfriend, what she really got in store for my son, that kind of stuff. I personally don't feel comfortable giving readings on things like that, and I because it's that to me is not what it should be used for. I don't judge either way whether people want to do those kind of readings or receive those kind of readings. I just feel that the tarot can really can really pinpoint a path for someone who's really struggling. It can really help someone who's lost. When the cards are read, they can definitely point out where what you're doing wrong and how to fix it. And that's what I like about tarot personally. But again, I understand that when people go to get a tarot reading, they want to know what's in store for them, usually on a mundane level. So we're going to talk about how the tarot, as its primary purpose of helping those with self-development, we're going to talk about how that individuation process takes place. So all humans, we have what we call the conscious mind. And that can also be represented as the ego and the persona. And a persona is the mask that we wear from day to day to fit in within the parameters of society. So we have this idea that we think that it's an individual. So the ego or the conscious mind is what we as individuals look like. But again, it's within the parameters of what society feels is acceptable and respectable. So it's nothing really individual about it all. So an example of the persona would be, oh, I am a student, I am a doctor, I am a lawyer. Those are masks. And it's not to say that it's a bad thing or a good thing. It's just that is how you identify yourself. People identify themselves with their religion. People identify themselves with their occupation. Those are masks. It doesn't really get to the truth of who we are. Persona is our social identity. We do what is acceptable in other people's eyes, for our family, for school, for society. So it's a thing where that persona has to be integrated and or disintegrated, because some of the persona in the mask creates a lot of self-inflicted mental disorders such as narcissism, people who are egotistical, people who have no real idea of who they are. So they identify so much with status, or they find their self-esteem and value in objects or things that are fleeting, Along with the persona, we also have the personal unconscious. And the personal unconscious contains memories of our past, traumatic events, feelings in the body, feelings that can be memories too, but actual energetic feelings, experiences that actually can control our day-to-day lives. A lot of our behavior is actually subconscious, and some say that 95% of our environment and our lifestyle stems from our subconscious mind, what's in the personal unconscious. So the key is to become the master over that subconscious. So where you can actually integrate yourself. All of the things that have been traumatic for you, all of the things that have been painful, you can integrate that in a way that is healthy. You disintegrate the ego. You'll be also to manifest things pretty quickly once you master the subconscious mind. And once you integrate the personal unconscious with the conscious mind, you can experience a flush of healing and a greater understanding of all of humanity. You see yourself as one with humanity and as one with the universe. There's a lot of things that come with talking about that integration and what that means. But for simplistic meanings, it's basically when you become aware of self and when you become enlightened. And there's been times when I have gotten really down, and I would just do a reading. I would ask for a guidance reading, and it will point out. It's very blunt. Again, this is the traditional tarot deck. I don't really have much experience with oracle cards or like angel cards and stuff, but tarot is very blunt in that if you are doing something you don't have no business doing or thinking about something you don't have, it will tell you that you have issues with low self-esteem or you have issues with your ego, being a narcissist or being arrogant. It will tell you certain things and it will let you know the outcome of where you're going. Now, luckily with tarot, nothing is set in stone. And again, a good reader wants a client to walk away feeling like they have gained something that can help them in their life. I mean, for me personally, when I give a tarot reading, I do read from the point of helping individuals on their journey, as well as giving them the divination that they need. Any event that the reading is not what they want to hear, there's ways to read those cards as purely advice cards, purely cards that will help the individual in their own individuation process. Because when you're reading those cards, it really is access. You really are accessing a part of the subconscious energy of that person, but also that subconscious is linked to the collective unconscious. And that's where those symbols and those motifs come from. And you have to read them as a process, as a story to really help that individual based on what they're asking. So I know it's a very convoluted concept and one that may take way more time than what's allotted. Again, I'm not bashing anyone that gets a reading purely for divination purposes. I have done that myself, and I do not judge people who come to me. Depending, again, it depends. I'm not gonna get too mundane with the reading now. I'm not, and you do feel the energy. Like when you're reading this stuff, you tap into the energy of what that person is going through and where their mind is at. And I have been around individuals who I know, they're going through things, and when you have to take on that energy, it does affect you. So I do not want to be in a position where I have to subject myself to a certain vibration that I'm not used to and that I have to work hard to get out of afterwards. So that's tangential to what this actual video is about. But I do want you walking away knowing that tarot can be used for your own personal self-development. And not every tarot reader is going to agree with, all this individuation process. I can show the ancient texts and even the research by occultists and other scholars where there is a link to what I'm talking about as far as the Akashic records, the collective unconscious, and integrating oneself to the higher self and to the integrated self. There's actually cards in tarot that represent that. There's certain combinations in tarot that represents a state of consciousness. It can tell you if your consciousness is perverted, if your consciousness is pure, if your consciousness is just living life, if you're unappreciative, if you're grateful. it will tell you those things and if those things are beneficial to you and if they're not. And again, that is what I enjoy most about tarot, is being able to help people see patterns that are helping them or that are not helping them, and helping individuals in a way so that they can manifest greater things in their life, but not just obviously material things, but manifest more joy and more love and more peace of mind. That's what I really enjoy doing. So, again, tarot is a symbolic representation of patterns and thoughts and emotions from the collective unconscious / Akashic records. And when read in a certain way, usually by those who have a background in astrology, Kabbalah, numerology, or alchemy, not all four, but one of the, at least a couple of them, they can help individuals in divination and also with their own personal development and integrating their shadow into their conscious mind in a way that is healthy. So, thank you for listening to my long winded video. And uh, and please subscribe and comment and tell me your experiences with tarot, and if you used it more for divination, if you used it more for your own personal development or for guidance. Let me know how you view the tarot. I make no judgments on how people go about their tarot. So I just have one perspective. And again, I thank you for listening to that perspective. Until next time, bye.